Imagine the most powerful empire in human history, a titan of marble, iron, and blood, shattered not by external gods, but by its own hands. One wrong choice, one arrogant decree, one fatal oversight, and the light of Western civilization flickers out forever. These are the moments the Roman eagle flew too close to the sun. If you love stories of power, betrayal, and ancient glory, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. New Roman history drops every week. The father of the end. The year is 180 AD. The Roman Empire is at its absolute zenith. From the rain-swept hills of Scotland to the scorching sands of the Sahara, the word of the emperor is law. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, has held for 2 centuries. This is the golden age of humanity, or so it seems to those living within the protection of the legions. At the center of this world stands Marcus Aurelius. He is the philosopher king, a man of stoic discipline, wisdom, and duty. But as he lies dying in a cold military camp on the Danube frontier, he is about to commit the first, and perhaps most catastrophic, mistake in the history of the empire. For nearly a century, Rome has thrived under a system of adoptive succession. The sitting emperor would find the most capable, most brilliant, most disciplined man in the realm and adopt him as his heir. Merit, not blood, ruled the world. It gave Rome the 5 good emperors, a string of leaders who were more interested in the stability of the state than the luxury of the palace. But Marcus Aurelius, for all his stoic wisdom, is still a father. He looks at his son, Commodus. The boy is 18. He is handsome, strong, and utterly, dangerously incompetent. He has no interest in the grinding work of administration or the tactical nuances of the border wars. He wants the applause of the Colosseum. He wants the divinity of a god. He wants the power without the responsibility. Marcus knows this. He has seen the darkness in his son's eyes. Yet, in a moment of human weakness that would cost tens of millions of lives, he breaks the tradition of merit. He names Commodus his successor. The moment the crown touches Commodus's head, the clock starts ticking on the Roman Empire. Commodus doesn't lead, he performs. He spends the imperial treasury on lavish games, appearing in the arena dressed as Hercules, slaughtering exotic animals and crippled soldiers while the Senate watches in terrified silence. He neglects the frontiers. He ignores the rising inflation. He turns the government into a den of sycophants and assassins. But the mistake isn't just about one bad man. It's about the precedent. By returning to a hereditary monarchy, Marcus Aurelius broke the engine of Roman stability. The message is sent, the throne isn't earned, it's taken. The result is a vacuum. When Commodus is eventually strangled in his bath by a wrestling coach, there is no plan. There is no best man waiting in the wings. Instead, there is the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own elite bodyguards. In one of the most shameful moments in human history, the guard realizes they are the only ones with swords in a room full of politicians. They don't look for a leader. They look for a buyer. In 193 AD, the Praetorian Guard literally puts the Roman Empire up for auction. They stand on the walls of their camp and shout to the wealthiest men in the city, asking for bids. The winner, a man named Didius Julianus, pays 25,000 sestertii per soldier to become the master of the world. He lasts 66 days. The mistake of Commodus has cracked the foundation. The army has realized that the emperor doesn't rule because of tradition or law, he rules because the soldiers allow him to. The legions on the frontiers hear about the auction in Rome and they are furious. Not because it's wrong, but because they weren't the ones getting paid. The empire is no longer a state, it is a prize. And as the generals at the edges of the world begin to turn their eagle standards toward Rome, the long, bloody era of the barracks emperors begins. Rome is about to learn that when you make the throne a matter of the highest bidder, the price is always paid in blood. But while the generals fight for the crown, a much more subtle and deadly mistake is brewing in the economy, one that will turn Roman gold into worthless lead and leave the borders wide open for the nightmare to come. While the generals are busy murdering each other for a seat on the throne, a silent killer is creeping through the streets of Rome. It isn't a plague, and it isn't a foreign army. It's a mistake of math and greed. For centuries, the Roman denarius was the US dollar of the ancient world. It was a coin you could trust, minted from nearly pure silver. But as the barracks emperors take power, they realize they have a problem. They need to keep the soldiers happy, or they'll be the next ones with a knife in their back. The Emperor Septimius Severus famously whispered on his deathbed, "Enrich the soldiers, and scorn all other men." It was a recipe for survival, but a death sentence for the economy. To pay the skyrocketing salaries of the legions, the emperors begin a process called debasement. They take the silver coins, melt them down, and mix in cheap copper. To the naked eye, the coin looks the same, but the soul is gone. By the middle of the 3rd century, the silver content of the denarius drops from 95% to less than 5%. Rome has invented hyperinflation. Prices for bread, oil, and wine skyrocket. The middle class is wiped out. Farmers abandon their lands because the taxes, demanded in food and goods because the money is worthless, are too high to pay. The empire, once a sprawling network of free trade, begins to shrink into a collection of isolated, fortified estates. The mistake is clear. They traded the long-term health of the civilization for the short-term loyalty of the sword. But even a bankrupt Rome is a fortress. That is, until the year 376 AD, when the empire makes the single most avoidable mistake in its 1,000-year history. On the banks of the Danube River, a terrifying sight appears. Not an invading army, but a sea of humanity. 200,000 Goths, men, women, and children, are fleeing the Huns, a nightmare force from the deep east that eats, sleeps, and fights on horseback. The Goths aren't looking for conquest, they are looking for asylum. They beg to enter the empire, promising to farm the land and fight for Rome in exchange for safety. Emperor Valens, sitting in the east, sees an opportunity. He thinks he's getting a free army. He grants them entry. But he makes a fatal error. He leaves the logistics to corrupt local governors. Instead of feeding the refugees, the Roman officials see a chance to get rich. They hoard the food meant for the Goths and sell it back to them at predatory prices. When the Goths run out of money, the Romans offer them a sickening deal. They will trade one dog for one Gothic child to be sold into slavery. Think about that. The Romans are trading dog meat for the children of the warriors they just invited into their house. The mistake wasn't letting the Goths in. The mistake was the arrogance of believing Rome could humiliate a desperate people without consequence. Predictably, the Goths revolt. They turn from refugees into an angry, starving insurgency in the heart of the Roman Balkans. Emperor Valens is furious. He marches his elite imperial army to crush these barbarians at a place called Adrianople. His advisors tell him to wait. Reinforcements from the Western Empire are only days away. But Valens is jealous. He wants the glory for himself. He wants to prove that he doesn't need help. It is August 9th, 378 AD. The heat is suffocating. The Roman soldiers have been marching all day without food or water. Valens orders a blind charge against the Gothic wagon circle. He thinks he's facing a disorganized mob. He is wrong. As the Roman infantry tires itself out against the barricades, a thunderous sound begins to shake the earth. Out of the hills, the Gothic heavy cavalry, the Gruthungi, returns from a foraging mission. They slam into the Roman flank like a hammer hitting glass. The Roman lines collapse. The elite legions, the pride of the world, are packed so tightly they can't even draw their swords. It is a slaughterhouse. By sunset, 2/3 of the Eastern Roman army is dead. And Emperor Valens? He is never seen again. Some say he burned to death in a peasant's hut while hiding. Others say he was trampled into the mud, his body unrecognizable. For the first time in 800 years, a barbarian army has annihilated a Roman emperor on Roman soil. The shield is broken. The gates are open. And as the Goths realize that the invincible Romans can bleed, they look toward the greatest prize of all. The road to the Eternal City is wide open, and Rome's final, most heartbreaking mistake is about to be made by the one man who was supposed to save it. The year is 408 AD, and the Western Roman Empire is a hollow shell of its former glory. The capital has been moved from Rome to Ravenna, a city surrounded by swamps, chosen not for its strategic value, but because the emperor, Honorius, is a coward who wants a place where he can hide from his own shadow. But there is one man who still holds the fragments of the world together, Flavius Stilicho. Stilicho is a titan of a man, the Magister Militum, the master of soldiers. He is a brilliant strategist, a tireless defender, and a man of absolute loyalty. But there's a catch: Stilicho is only half Roman. His father was a Vandal, a barbarian. In an era of rising xenophobia and desperate paranoia, Stilicho's greatest strength is also his death warrant. While Stilicho is away fighting off the Goths and the Vandals, the politicians in Ravenna are whispering in the emperor's ear. They tell Honorius that Stilicho is a traitor, that he's plotting to put his own son on the throne, and that he's too soft on the barbarian tribes. Honorius, a man whose only hobby is reportedly raising chickens, believes them. In a move of staggering stupidity, Honorius orders the execution of Stilicho, the only man capable of leading the Roman army. Stilicho, ever the loyal Roman, refuses to allow his own soldiers to start a civil war to save him. He walks to the executioner's block and bows his head. With the stroke of a blade, Rome has just decapitated itself. But the mistake doesn't end with a single death. After Stilicho is executed, a wave of bloodthirsty xenophobia sweeps through Italy. Roman mobs, fueled by hatred and fear, turn on the families of the Gothic and Vandal soldiers who were serving in the Roman army. They slaughter thousands of innocent wives and children. The result is as predictable as it is catastrophic. 30,000 elite barbarian soldiers, who had been the backbone of the Roman defense, defect overnight. They aren't just leaving, they are out for blood. They march straight to the camp of Alaric, the king of the Goths, and they offer him their swords. Alaric doesn't even have to fight his way into Italy. He just walks through the door the Romans left wide open. In August 410 AD, the unthinkable happens. For the first time in 800 years, the gates of Rome are breached. Alaric and his army swarm into the Eternal City. They don't burn it to the ground, they don't have to. The psychological trauma is enough. They strip the gold from the temples, they loot the palaces of the senators, and they carry off the emperor's sister as a prize. The mistake of Rome wasn't just a military defeat. It was the refusal to adapt. Rome survived for centuries by turning its enemies into citizens, its conquerors into Romans. But at the end, the empire became brittle. It chose purity over pragmatism, and paranoia over leadership. The final mistake came in 476 AD. The last emperor, a teenage boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus, after the founder of Rome and its greatest leader, is quietly deposed by a Germanic general named Odoacer. There is no epic battle. There is no heroic last stand. Odoacer simply sends the imperial regalia, the crown and the purple cloak, to Constantinople with a note that says, there is no longer a need for a separate emperor in the West. The light goes out not with a bang, but with a whimper. Rome didn't fall because of one single invader or one single plague. It died from 1,000 self-inflicted wounds. It failed to value merit over blood. It destroyed its own economy to pay for its own survival. It mistreated the very people it needed for its defense. And finally, it executed the only leaders who had the vision to save it. The ruins of the Forum still stand today, a forest of broken marble and silent stone. They serve as a haunting reminder to every superpower that has followed: no empire is too big to fail, and the greatest threat to a civilization is rarely the enemy at the gates. It's the choices made by the people inside them. Outro CTA. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from the ancient world. History isn't dead, it's just waiting to be told.